You know what's funny? That joke I didn't write. Gosh, that joke would have been so funny had I wrote it, but I didn't, and its potential has been lost to the void forever because time is like a train. It goes forward, except trains also go the other way and time doesn't. Good more after Eve night, Cosmoronic number 13. I'm Fringin', I hope you're all doing well. So, the endgame video is finally out, and the response has been great. More so than I was expecting. I talked about it briefly last week, but it can be difficult when you work on a project for a long time to maintain perspective. The way that you view something you make is always going to differ from the way that somebody who didn't make it views it. Almost necessarily, right? Because when you make something and then you watch it, or you read it, or you look at it, kind of just different thoughts are going to be swirling around in your head. You're going to see the process that you went through to make it, the ideas that were realized well, and the ideas that weren't realized quite so well. Whether or not anybody is really interested in it, because your level of investment is going to differ from just other people. And depending on the type of person you are, your investment may well diminish with time as you work on it. And so it's difficult to know how people are going to respond to it. And in this case, it seems pretty good. Seems like people are enjoying it, which I guess is the important part. But I mean, already, now that it's done, it's a matter of thinking about what's next. And how to take all of the lessons learned from working on that project to make the next one better. When you make something and you release it, you're going to get a wealth of feedback, especially on the internet. And I think it can be challenging to figure out how to implement that feedback. You know, whether you've made something good or bad doesn't necessarily hinge on how people respond to it. You could have made something great and nobody in the world appreciated it. But what are the odds of that, really? And so it's a matter of, I guess, ensuring that any feedback that you receive, that you take it on board. Think about how applicable it is. Maybe run some thoughts past people whose perspectives you trust, and then hopefully you can find a way to implement all that feedback into the next project. But the important part, I think, is not to intrinsically and only derive the value of what you've made from how people responded to it. Even though I don't know that it's even possible as like a human being to not care how people respond to it. If you throw something out to the world, you obviously care to some extent how people respond to it. And I think it can be easy to sink into, I don't know if I'd describe it as unhealthier ways of interpreting criticism, but definitely less helpful ways of interpreting criticism. It's something that gets talked about on YouTube a lot, where you'll see people talk about how the decisions that they made in terms of the way that they make their videos, the way they're structured, the content, thumbnails and whatnot, that a lot of it's oriented around, well, you gotta find a way to tap into the way that YouTube works as an ecosystem, which is always ever changing. That's a funny string of words. Always ever changing. What does it mean to be sometimes ever changing? I think it can be easy to slot into a mindset where what ought to be paramount, which is the creative process itself and trying to make the best thing that you can almost slide into a secondary goal, whereas the prior goal will be, well, how do I essentially seize the tools available on the platform to get more eyes on it? But I don't know, it seems like an inevitably destructive mindset, because you kind of can't control these things. You can control what you make, but how people respond to it is always going to be up to them. And so you just got to try the best you can to make the best video you can, and hope that is that yields a positive response. I think that's all you can do. The reason why I'm running down this thought process is because now that the video is out, now that I'm getting feedback on it from the audience and peers, and just seeing how, broadly it's being responded to, that is going to, no matter how much I think about it or not, it's going to influence what I work on next. And my goal right now is to make sure that I take the feedback that I've received on this video and consciously and deliberately apply it to what I do next. as opposed to kind of haplessly being batted around, kind of more unconsciously interpreting that information and then potentially putting it to not optimal use. It sounds like I'm being a downer. The response has been great. It's been really cool. I'm glad that people are enjoying it. I'm glad that people are finding it interesting and humorous and informative. That was the goal, and it was hard to tell whether it was going to be any of those things. But the response has been great, and thank you all for the kind words. I really do appreciate it. We are immediately going to heel turn into a broadly negative topic. The second season of Halo Infinite, paradoxically titled Lone Wolves, kicked off last week, and I've been playing it. Not a whole bunch, frankly. I keep finding myself jumping in for a game or two, rather than playing for a few hours at a time, which I can't say is a good sign. When it first came out, I was playing it a lot. I remember I was playing for extended periods of time, which, funnily enough, was not what 343 wanted, clearly, in terms of the way that the challenge system was oriented. You know, the challenge system was very much geared towards playing every day, rather than playing a lot in, maybe once or twice. But I mean, I was playing it a lot, and basically every day, when it first came out, when the novelty was still there. But alas, the novelty wore off very quickly, and in my case, it wore off slower than it seems to have done for many people. I was still playing that game fairly regularly into February, but a lot of people I know jumped on, were playing a lot of it when it came out in November, and dropped off very quickly, which, you expect a drop-off, naturally, for any game as soon as it comes out. When it comes out, the hype's there, everybody's excited and eager. People give it a try, because it's topical and they're aware of it, but then it steadily dwindles away. But the extent to which the player base dwindled away when the game first came out... Oh, man. Every 343 Halo game, I'm pretty sure, has had that problem. All the Halo games have it to some extent, right? When the game comes out, lots of people are playing it and having fun, and you lose people, you lose more of the casual audience, but they maintained a core. Halo 2 and 3 definitely maintained more of a core audience that was sizable and healthy, and Halo 3 in particular was aided by Forge and all of the player creation tools and all of the content that people were making for that game, the machinimas back in the day. All of that helped foster that healthy community that is necessary for a live service game, which Halo Infinite is, more so than it was for Halo 3, which you could say in a certain sense was a live service game. I guess a progenitor live service game, a multiplayer game where content was added. But I mean, that was paid content, right? You chose to opt in. The service wasn't ever evolving, and there weren't huge sweeping changes to the core, or like these long-term narrative threads that they would have to keep you hooked on, or really a desire to keep the game going for years, which is definitely the case for Halo Infinite. And so when the player base dwindles away and drops as low as it did with Season 1, not a good sign, and I'm sure 343 weren't very happy about that. Season 2 comes 6 months after the game launched. In those 6 months, there has been no substantial content drop. The most that's been added is like SWAT. The missing features, still not, they were never added in those 6 months. No Forge, no campaign co-op, mission select, no new maps. New modes were minimal. There were no like radically new modes. Because SWAT is just a variation of Slayer, in a sense. But now Season 2 comes along and changes that. This is what we get in Season 2. 2 new multiplayer maps. Catalyst, an arena map, and Breaker, a big team battle map. There are new game modes. Last Spartan Standing, King of the Hill, Attrition, which I'm pretty sure isn't available yet, and new rotating playlists that include, like, Vampire Ball, a variation of Oddball, and, something that I don't know if it was added in the last couple of months, because I hadn't played this game for about 2 months until, now the new season. Ninja Slayer, which is like something that I remember talking about when the game first came out, when it was like grapples and gravity hammers. This is grapples and energy swords, which is good enough. It also comes with a 100 tier battle pass with a whole bunch of new cosmetics. As for major functionality, like campaign co-op and forge, well, they're not here yet. If I've got the information right, campaign co-op and mission select, so basically making the campaign feature complete. That's August. So still 3 months away, and Forge enters beta later this year. So, why don't we talk about what we got right now in Season 2? The maps. I like Catalyst, but I've only played free-for-all games on that map so far, so it's a little too early to say how I feel about it overall. It's hard to say how well it will support team games, for example. It's a symmetrical map. It's got a lot of, it's more maze-like, I would say, than a lot of other maps in the game. There is a big open area in the middle, that has big sight lines, and lots of, definitely more, of a long-range area, but it's mostly mazes and corridors, and I guess it'll be interesting to see how well that fits in with Halo Infinite's mechanics. As for Breaker, I have only played that map in Last Spartan Standing, and a thought that I have that may or may not be accurate as I think about it is, was that map designed for Big Team Battle, or was it specifically designed for Last Spartan Standing and will just end up being a Big Team Battle map anyway? If you get what I mean. Does that map make sense for Big Team Battle? I'm not sure. You think about all of the other Big Team Battle maps, it feels like they are not as claustrophobic. They leverage more open spaces, and you get more of a sense of bases. This is the one team's base, and this is the other team's base. And then we have the big combat space in the middle, and we've designed a space that can work well for ground vehicles and aerial vehicles. I don't know if Breaker is as suited to Big Team Battle, despite being a Big Team Battle map technically. It definitely feels like it was designed primarily for Last Spartan Standing. And if you don't like Last Spartan Standing, which I kinda don't, then, it's kind of the problem, right? Big Team Battle in this game is very different from Big Team Battle in the other games. Like, it's got a lot more players. It's a very different mode. And if you don't like Big Team Battle, which I think it would be fair for that to be like a real possibility compared to in the old games where Big Team Battle still felt more in line with the arena experiences, it makes me wonder how much content you really feel like you're getting here, One arena map and one Big Team Battle map. At the very least, these two maps look different from what we've seen in the game for a long time, especially on the Big Team Battle front, where all of the maps are the biome of the campaign. Basically Pacific Northwest. The variety is welcome, but after 6 months, you might notice that the sentiment belying everything that I say right now will be, but 6 months though. Speaking of, the modes. It's nice to have King of the Hill, but it should have been in the game at launch. As for Last Spartan Standing, I don't know. It might just be me. I'm not as into these elimination game modes as everybody else seems to be. It's always been the case, really. I remember back in Call of Duty days, the like Modern Warfare 2 days, I think the second most popular mode after Team Deathmatch was Search and Destroy, and I just never really liked Search and Destroy as much as I liked Demolition or Domination, modes where I can respawn. I don't think I get as much out of elimination game modes, and that definitely applies to Battle Royales. It's just not my thing. But that's not particularly valuable, right, as a point of criticism. Yeah, I kind of don't like it. I hope that's helpful for you guys and whether or not you'd want to jump in and play that game mode. But I mean, the game mode itself, it is different, for sure, from just standard Battle Royale. You have 5 respawns. You start off with a pistol and a, man, I'm forgetting the name. It's the, basically the banished stun gun. And as you get kills, and assists, you know, as you get XP, you can level up. And by leveling up, you get access to new guns, incrementally, like 1 new gun per level. A problem I kinda see with the way that the system works is it's a little hard to say when speaking about the Halo sandbox that certain weapons are categorically an upgrade. I don't know that I would consider the Mangler to be a strict upgrade to the pistol, especially when, maybe someone can confirm this for me in chat or in the comments later on, the Mangler feels like it's been nerfed. I remember the Mangler being a pretty powerful weapon that it took, it could take as little as 3 shots, 2 shots to take down the shield, and then 1 shot to the head, and then you get the kill. Feels like that's not the case anymore, that it takes more like 4 or 5 shots to get the kill. And fortunately, we've had it clarified. Apparently, yes, they did nerf it. Maybe it's more about accuracy at this point, right? If you, because I think it was 4 shots before. 4 shots, like, guaranteed. Something about it feels a bit off. Or maybe it was that they nerfed the melee damage. That would explain a lot. Because it used to be that the melee damage was chunky. The point I'm getting at, though, regardless of whether it's been nerfed, is I don't know that it could be said that the Mangler is a strict upgrade from the pistol, and then, you know, you keep sort of working up from there. Now, to be fair to this game mode, you can choose not to upgrade. That's a choice you make. It's not like Gun Game or something where the upgrade is automatic. So, for instance, you could choose to stay on the pistol, accrue the XP that you need to level up multiple levels to then get to the AR, or... But again, it's like, oh yes, is the Commando a strict upgrade from the AR? It's like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure that I agree with that. I feel like the AR is a really versatile gun and the Commando is a bit... I don't know. Another mechanic that's included in Last Spartan Standing is that if a player gets eliminated, they'll drop their XP and you can get it, and then that can help you level up really quickly. There are also little item drops and power weapons and stuff that land around the map. There is a level of unfairness to it, though. You could spawn in a match right next to one. You could spawn, yeah, you could spawn right next to, like, active camo or grenades. Also, the spawns aren't great. There have been times where I spawn and in 2 seconds I'm being fired upon. I guess I'm just not finding it particularly enthralling. The novelty is welcome, and there's probably an audience that is happy to have this mode. But when we're still missing, like, the bomb game modes, like Bomb Assault, we're still missing Infection, that might just be more of a me preference. I suppose it's more so that it's hard for me to look at new game modes and be thrilled when there's so much that's still missing. I will say that, I do like these rotating modes. I don't know if they've been added with this expansion or if they've been added in the last couple of months, but like I said, Vampire Ball, Ninja Slayer, they're really fun. These were modes that, because it's in Rumble Pit playlist, which I don't remember being in the game. And that's cool. They should keep those in the rotation. Like, that's good. But is it enough? After 6 months. I've heard that aspects of the movement system have been changed in Season 2. From what I understand, because I haven't been super engaged in the discussion on this game, you know, over the last week or so, high-level movement abilities, you know how, like, you could build momentum through sliding and everything? Apparently those systems have changed, and people aren't thrilled about that, and I believe 343 have said that they are going to be adding in these skill jumps again, or at the very least reconsidering it. But why would you take them out if it's something that everybody really likes? And especially if it made, by the sounds of it, you know, the high level players, the people... Halo, like... The only people who are still going to be playing Halo Infinite now are going to be the hardcore audience. The people who are really interested in the game. They really like Halo. They want to get immersed in it, engage with the mechanics thoroughly. You know, like, those are the people who are left. Why would you remove the higher level, high skill mechanics? I mean, there's a pretty clear reason why that would be the case, right? You reduce the skill ceiling. But when your game is already so low in its player count, and the main people you've got left who are going to be willing to buy into your battle pass system and pay money for things are the people who would want these mechanics, that seems ill-advised. And especially when it seems, over the last decade at this stage, that 343 wants Halo to be a competitive game. These are the things that you want to leave in your game, as far as I'm concerned. Even if they were accidental, if they develop a meta of their own, like BXR, probably worth keeping it in. There's something to be said about, you know, when an exploit becomes part of the meta of the game. Now, that can go too far, right? Like we talk about the Meta Knight, you know, that was an instance where it's just breaking the game to where Meta Knight, from what I understand, is banned in a lot of Smash tournaments. At least in Brawl. But in this case, I really don't see the harm in it, especially if everybody can leverage it. It's something everybody can do. It's a mechanic that everybody can use. But I guess we're in a different era, right? There was no getting rid of BXR. That's just part of the game. It's in the game. There's no changing it. And maybe Bungie would have changed it if they noticed it. But in this case, you can make all the changes you want. But unfortunately, the problem is that it seems like reversing these changes is not easy. So I wonder how many people may drop off in the time it takes for them to re-implement those features, or even, because it seems like they're listening to player feedback here, if they're actually going to bring it back exactly as it was, or if they're still going to try and push some of their concessions in, because 343 kind of just aren't super receptive to criticism. And they never really have been. A sense that you get from 343 in their vidocs and, you know, interviews, and just in the way that their games are designed, is our ideas are awesome, they're really great, and if you don't like them, well, you're just unreceptive to change. That is a sense that you get with 343's tenure of the Halo series. And hey, it may well be influenced by something that somebody has reminded me of in chat, when a member of the community highlighted the massive desync issue in MCC, which, now that I know that that problem exists, it explains so many frustrating moments I had playing Halo 3 on MCC, where you would hit someone in the face and blood would splurt out, but the hit just didn't register. Big issue. And I'm pretty sure that Halo Infinite has a similar problem. I remember getting sent a video where a guy uses the skewer, shoots it hits the Spartan in the face, it's sticking out of his face right in front of him, but it didn't register because of the desync issues, or hits, whatever the issue is, when the shots aren't registering in a competitive multiplayer shooter, bad. And in the case of the Halo 3 example, I think there were pro players who worked at 343, laughed at the video. Like, if you want to build an active community where people feel like they're being listened to and they're going to be excited about the work that you're making, that's maybe one of the worst ways of going about responding to player criticism. Now, I guess the topic is interesting because I wouldn't subscribe to the notion that just because you've been told something by your audience means that they're right and you're wrong. And hey, maybe that's an attitude that they have at 343. They don't understand it. They're not developers or something. Unfortunately, the problem is that, like, these are the people who want to play your game, and if you're not providing them with an experience that they want, they're just gonna leave. You can't have no choice but to at least to some extent, respond to that criticism. You can't just do whatever you want and expect people to show up. If they don't like what you made, and you're like, well, these are the better ideas, what does that even matter at that point, right? Your game's gonna fail. I guess if you're principally rooted to the idea of, no, our ideas are great and you need to present better counter-arguments to the systems we have, that's one thing, but like, the game is dying. You know, it would seem, at first glance, that Season 2 has not revived the player base. It may still be too early to tell, but generally, hype for new content peaks at release rather than days or weeks later. When Season 2 launched, the game had roughly 20,000 active players, the highest it's been, mind you, in months. And over the last week, that player count has dwindled to about 12,000, 24-hour peak. Surely, this is not a good outcome. Surely, 343 are not happy with this. That on Steam, they are well below 70 games, some of which are single player, some of which are old, up to a decade old, some of which are indie games made by very small teams that have managed to garner a larger audience than Halo. Halo used to be the #1 played game on Xbox Live. That was a long time ago now. But nevertheless, Halo, I get the distinct impression that I was right in having trepidations regarding Season 2. Season 2, Lone Wolves, is probably too little too late. A handful of new game modes and 2 new maps 6 months after release is a bafflingly pitiful content drop, especially when the game in question is significantly compromised in favor of monetization. That's something that needs to be kept in mind. You can't ask people to accept a subpar progression system and wank customization, as well as their money, only to deliver less content than almost every other installment in the series. It's not that the impatience and the frustration is stemming from people who were given a wealth of content, a great base, a really strong game. That's not what we got. We got a campaign that has problems and is missing functionality. We've got a multiplayer mode that is thoroughly deficient in maps and especially modes, missing core functionality like Forge. I sound like a broken record, but remember when it was a big deal and a bad thing that Forge in Halo 5 launched 2 months after Halo 5 launched? How things have changed. You have implemented in this game a progression system that is worse than every other Halo game in the series. It is worse, categorically, in favor of monetization. There are expectations that stem from that. People can compromise. People can compromise on systems that used to be great, that get changed because, well, it's a live service game, well, it's free to play, well, you'll be getting that content for free, you don't have to buy into it with, DLC map packs or anything. People can accept those, but you gotta give them something in return for that, I can't remember exactly how, because the other game because I don't play a lot of these games anymore, I used to, but I don't really now. Modern Warfare, by this stage, didn't it have, 5 or 6 new maps, maybe even more than that, and Warzone, a whole new component. And it launched with a fully featured campaign, and it launched with co-op that, from what I understand, wasn't very good, but at least it was there. There's really no reason why Halo, developed by a team of hundreds, with Microsoft's backing, and seemingly a blank check and the means to make whatever they want, on a timescale of their choosing, that they can't deliver equivalent content to their competitors, which they have to. They just have to. There's no choice. These are your competitors. Halo has competitors. It always really has, but it definitely has had since Call of Duty came up. But the thing is, it's not just Call of Duty, right? You're competing against other shooters in this field. You're competing against Counter-Strike, you're competing against Valorant, you're competing against Overwatch, though I guess it seems like the tide has really turned on Overwatch at this point. You know, you've got competitors in this space that, for all of the problems that those games have, seem to be delivering content more consistently. I get worried that Halo Infinite is not going to be able to pull out of this nosedive, this player-based nosedive. It's been revived a little bit. I don't see it going higher than it has been now. I don't know what they could add that would do that. You added a whole bunch of new modes. I say a whole bunch, it really wasn't, but compared to what came before, right? You've added new modes, new maps, and it went up to about 20,000, and now it's dwindling again after a week. It probably ain't going higher than that organically, because there's nothing more you can do. The game is free to play. Anybody who wants to play it can play it. You have complete market saturation. And I don't know. It's just not there. I'll keep playing it. I'll give it a chance. But I don't even see myself really playing it for much longer. When the game came out, I gave it a lot of time, and then it dwindled off. And here, it's like, I'll give you some time. I'm certainly not buying your battle pass, not after that first one. And I guess I'll be waiting until November for the next substantial content drop. I have seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and it is nonsense. But I don't really care to delve into why today. Instead, that film is going to serve as a jumping off point for a broader topic I've been thinking about for the last few weeks. The first act break of Multiverse of Madness sees Doctor Strange and America Chavez travel to a different universe after Kamar-Taj is destroyed by Wanda. Wong is still in Kamar-Taj, and as far as Doctor Strange is concerned, in extreme peril, despite the pressing nature of Wong's situation, Doctor Strange casually romps about in this alternative New York with absolutely no urgency. This is a contradiction of character, but one I imagine a lot of people didn't pick up on because it doesn't call too much attention to itself. Why is this a contradiction of character? Well, I mean, if I'm to believe that Doctor Strange gives a fuck about Wong, which he explicitly makes clear in this film he does, the first thing he says when he arrives in this universe is, you gotta get me back to Kamar-Taj, I need to help Wong, then it makes no sense for Strange to casually stroll around rather than desperately make his way back to, or desperately make his way to the sanctum in this universe. It's a little thing that makes a big difference, but it seems like it's just out of sight, out of mind. You can't see Wong right now, so Wong isn't in trouble. But in universe, there's no reason why Doctor Strange isn't very hurriedly trying to solve this problem. It is a contradiction of character, and it stems from something that seems, trivial. Someone might say that's nitpicking, but it isn't. Character writing is a little more complicated than people often make it out to be, in my opinion. Character stems from what people say, what they don't say, and most importantly, what they do. What characters do is the most important part of who they are, because that's all we are, really, is what we do. As a writer, it's so important to remember this when crafting every aspect of one story. I'm not sure how I would categorize this topic. I'm not sure what I would describe it as, like an all-encompassing, a simple way to get across what we're going to be delving into. It is about character writing, but it's about a part of character writing that I feel can be very easily neglected. And it's a little bit different from a lot of the discussion about character writing, which is more the core stuff you think about, right? The main arc, the big decisions, as opposed to the smaller things that are in part plot. Like, this is a plot point that is influencing character, that doesn't call much attention to itself. I think the easiest way to sum up what we're going to be talking about is the little things matter. YMS has made a video on The Lion King 2019. It's a very good video. It's an excellent video. One of the things that I value so much about that video is that it has highlighted so many examples of minor changes to dialogue that have a significant influence on the narrative and the characters. The Lion King is deliberately crafted and deliberately written The characters say things that make sense to the situation and tell us a lot about who they are and are consistent throughout the story. One of the examples that is highlighted in the film is, it's the pouncing lesson. When Mufasa has taken Simba across the Pride Land, Zazu sweeps in and he's talking about the morning report. And Zazu's like, "Good morning, sire." And Mufasa says, "Good morning, Zazu." And it's like, "Time for the morning report." To which Mufasa says, "Fire away," with a smile on his face. What does this tell us? This really minor, seemingly inconsequential exchange that will, lead to a different thing happening. What does it tell us? First of all, a very friendly greeting to both of them. Zazu has sought out Mufasa to let him know about the morning report, and Mufasa is immediately receptive to it. Like, yes, let me know what's happening. I'm the king. I'm invested in this land. And then Zazu proceeds to explain how, what's happening. And Mufasa is paying attention. Simba's not, because he's a kid. He's excited. He wants to explore the world and jump around and play around. And as he's trying to pounce on a cricket, Mufasa gets distracted and is like, "What are you doing?" And then Simba says pouncing, and Mufasa says, let an old pro show you how it's done. So what's happened here? To be fair, right, I'm basically just parroting the points that YMS made. Like, go watch that video. That video was excellent. But it's a good example that I want to highlight here of this topic. Mufasa gets distracted because of its investment in his son and what his son is doing. Simba's the one who's learning how to pounce. And Mufasa seeing that is like, okay, let me show you how to pounce, right? It's all informing us about character. What have we seen so far? Mufasa is dutiful. He takes his responsibilities seriously, but he values his son a lot. And so much so that he can be distracted from those duties to teach his son, lessons about how to be a lion, essentially. In Jon Favreau's The Lion King, the exchange plays out differently. Zazu just shows up and he's like, "Sire!" And then, in an exasperated tone, Mufasa says, "Oh, good morning, Zazu. Do you have the morning report?" It's like, you don't give a fuck, do you? Like, you don't seem to give a shit. You don't seem to be, happy to see Zazu. It seems like you really don't care. And then Zazu just goes off. It's basically... I feel it's John Oliver. It's John Oliver is going on a big ramble. And then Mufasa leads down to Simba and is like, "You want to do, here's a pouncing lesson. Let's have some fun and fuck with Zazu." What's happened there is that these minor changes that Jon Favreau probably didn't even realize were meaningful changes have radically changed what the characters are actually doing in this scene and what it tells us about their characters. We totally eliminate Simba's playful, energetic attitude. We've removed that, which is an important thing to maintain throughout the story because it's what leads to the big events. It leads to a lot of significant things. It's like a big aspect of who Simba is. We've removed that completely by eliminating him choosing to do the pouncing himself. In terms of Mufasa, the big change is we have a dutiful king who is distracted by his son because he cares deeply for his son. Instead, he doesn't really seem to give a shit at all, which betrays entirely who Mufasa is, which is that he is a dutiful king who loves his son. These two paired together. You've changed it with very minor tweaks to dialogue that I think one could easily overlook if you don't give a fuck. Which, when you watch that video, you get the distinct impression that Jon Favreau did not care at all. Anyway, thanks for that reference, YMS. Watch his video, because it's excellent. And it does highlight this point, which I want to elaborate on a bit more in this here episode. When fixing bugs in a video game, developers run the risk of accidentally creating new bugs, owing to the ways in which different systems interact with one another. Nothing is for free. When you make a change and you think you fixed something, you may have inadvertently damaged another system that relies on that system that you made changes to, and then you need to fix that. In video game development, you can't, treat the work that you're doing in a vacuum. It will influence what exists elsewhere. And it's not even just a matter of bugs, it is a matter of design. You could change how far a character jumps and then it throws all your levels out of whack. You could add a new mechanic that throws all your levels out of whack. Or changes the way that the enemies will account for you. You know, it all is interconnected. And I think people are really readily able to see how that's the case for video games. I would say that the same applies to stories. Individual narrative elements comprise a whole, and changing one element of a story will necessarily have an impact on the rest of it. You know, you could have a character react to a situation one way, and you could choose for them to say one line of dialogue without realizing what that says about their perspective, the kind of subtext that is belying that perspective that they share, why they would say it, the way in which they said it. All of these things can be read into, and in a good story ought to be read into, right? That's the sign that you're doing something well. That someone can look at your story, that a character makes a choice or speaks in a certain way, does a certain thing at a certain time, and it just lines up because of how they've been characterized before, or how it ties into a theme. You know, a good story will rely on the interconnected nature of all of the component parts of a narrative to enhance every moment. You have to account for it all, because it will inform it. Or you end up in a situation where you have an urgent situation, a character's friend is in peril, and they don't seem to care, because you've decided that you want to have them slowly meander around without any sense of urgency. I know I said I didn't want to talk about Doctor Strange a whole bunch, but that happens throughout the film. Like, yeah, we've incapacitated Wanda, but we know how powerful she is. I know, I'm Doctor Strange, I'm meant to be smart, and all of these characters have an awareness of how powerful she is. Let's casually and slowly get to the all-powerful book, the only one of which exists in reality, that we can use to defeat Wanda and save all realities. Let's slowly get it, and slowly pick it up, and then allow it to be destroyed. This informs character, it does. And it's something that seems minor, but it just isn't. It's so important to remember, when writing a story, that the individual narrative elements comprise a whole, and changing one element of a story will necessarily impact the rest of it. It's important to think about this when making decisions about what characters do, even if those choices seem inconsequential. You think about this in stories that aren't as complicated, that are pretty straightforward. I've been thinking about it a bit because of the Halo show, but something that you see a lot in the Halo games is that Chief he's a stoic guy. He's not a hugely emotional guy. He's held together, he's calm and level-headed. But when you see him throw like a nod of camaraderie, in a sense, to an ODST, plant his hand on the shoulder of a panicking Marine, kneel in close to Cortana, and sort of hold himself in a warm way, all of these things are informing character. They're really small, and you could have left them out, but their presence goes a long way to establishing that even this character who doesn't talk a lot cares about people. He cares about people. You think about ludonarrative dissonance, for instance, how it kind of doesn't follow as much in, say, Uncharted, that Nathan Drake is a quip-smart, happy dude who, you know, he obviously doesn't relish in killing people or anything, but yet when you jump into gameplay, you know, I feel like a better example is Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider is an example of where you have this mismatch of you kind of just want people to put it out of their mind that there is a contradiction here, where you have a scene where Lara Croft has to kill someone for the first time, she's traumatized by it, but 5 minutes later she's plowing through people and all you have to account for it is her saying, "I'm so sorry," and then that evaporates in like another 20 or 30 minutes. You can't take these components in a vacuum. You can't ask the audience to just accept what you present to them without thinking about it more critically. Because in this case, it's not a matter of looking for things to pick apart. You have presented me with a scenario where what you're telling me to feel about what these characters are doing simply does not align with what is actually happening and what I, as like a normal person, would think about these choices that are being made. You know how in Revenge of the Sith, something that a lot of people will pick up on is that it was probably a mistake to have Obi-Wan draw his lightsaber first. The general way that we present the Jedi is the Jedi are defensive. They fight only when necessary. They don't attack. They are defensive. And the Sith are offensive. You know, they will fight you. They are ready to jump into a fight and use, you know, violence to win. And so people will look at Obi-Wan drawing his lightsaber first and identify that as being like, might it have been better to have Anakin draw his lightsaber first and lunge at him, and then have Obi-Wan pull his lightsaber out as a defensive gesture? It's minor. It's very minor. A lot of people probably didn't even care. But I would say that that is just the narratively correct choice to make. It's more in line with the theme, broadly, of the series. It's more in line with who Obi-Wan is, and who we see him to be in the OT. It's minor. It's really minor. You'd think nothing of it. But it all is taken as a whole, because every action that a character takes, from big to small, tells us about who they are. I mean, speaking further, right, on Star Wars, there's a reason why a lot of people take issue with Luke throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder. He could have done that. He could have tossed the lightsaber away. If you want to commit to the story that you're telling, which, I mean, obviously I don't like that story, and I don't think it's well supported, but think about the minor change you could make. Instead of him, like, casually and in an almost comedic way tossing the lightsaber over his shoulder, he turns around, looks at it in his hand, and tosses it away, like throws it into the, you know, throws it away. You could have him do that, or you could have him hold his arm over the cliff and just let it go and drop it. Either looking, you know, he could be maintaining direct eye contact with Rey, or, you know, he could not look at her at all, drop it and just walk off. All of these choices on their face end the same way. Luke is throwing away the lightsaber, but the way in which he does it tells us a lot about who he is and how we're meant to interpret that action. A choice narratively that can seem inconsequential in terms of its impact on character because you are ultimately achieving the same thing, while failing to account for variables that do matter in reality and do matter in this story: time, the manner in which that action is undertaken. More so, not a matter of where we get to, but how we get there, which I think is the way to approach storytelling in terms of piecing things together. Like, that's an important part to think about. That's an important part to consider, always. I think this attention to detail, coupled with a high level of deliberateness when crafting a story, is what it means to be a great writer. Creating the idea is the easy part. Realizing that idea is the difficult part. And it can't be done without consideration for how these little choices affect the broader narrative. Whenever I think about, like, the greatest stories ever, I never get the impression that what they achieved was an accident or incidental. You know, they weren't really thinking it through. You look at something like, say, Bly Manor, that is so intentionally written. It is so deliberately crafted that, you know, with each line of dialogue, with each action, with the shots, the information that you reveal and the information you keep to yourself and the hints, it's so clear when watching that show that it's all been crafted in service of reaching a point, and that so much thought was put into each aspect of it, even as much as into every line of dialogue. You just get that impression when you watch something like that. You really thought about this. You knew exactly what you were trying to do, and you probably dedicated a ton of time and a shit ton of effort into effortfully crafting and sculpting this story. You just get that impression with great stories, that there is that attention to detail, that even the smallest, you know, seizing every opportunity that's available to you in your narrative to prop it up. I don't think that you can fully realize an idea consistently without consideration for how these little choices affect the broader narrative. And if you can, like, it's probably unreliable. And it's, you know, when you look at, like, reliable storytellers, I mean, a reliable storyteller, for example, would be Pixar during the Golden Age, right? Up until and including the release of WALL-E. In all of those films, you can see that, how deliberate and intentional the choices are for what the characters do, what's shown and what's not shown, what they say and don't say, that you don't have these mistakes where you have characters who have been established to have a perspective and a relationship with characters, and that relationship evaporates because you just don't feel like accounting for that anymore. You're going to get to the same destination, so you forget that in universe, your characters are not... They're not outside of it. They don't know what the end is. They are in this situation and reacting to it as it comes. As you may or may not know, I like writing. I really value writing. I write. I want to create stories. And one of the challenges that I find in that process is how to account for all of these minor decisions, to seize as many opportunities as you can in your premise, to not allow things to slide and sort of slip below the radar, and to miss those opportunities or make those kinds of mistakes. I think it's important to keep all of this in mind, personally, and for you, if you're a writer or you want to write. Your scenes don't exist in isolation. Your characters aren't making choices in a vacuum. Everything affects, or rather anything, can affect your story. Even the smallest of actions or a single line of dialogue. And it's important to be vigilant about that, to keep that in mind, to think always about what this character would do in this situation, how that may influence the way that my plot's going to develop, how I can account for these things if I want to achieve certain payoffs that I want, or if it's too difficult or it doesn't really follow for this character, how do I need to change my payoff? How do I achieve my goals? In telling this story, in achieving a theme, or getting across, evoking an emotional response, a particular emotional response. I know what reaction I want. I know what I want to get out of the story and get at with this story. How do I get there? How do I get there without compromising the integrity of the story? That's the hard part, but that's an important part. Because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It is about the journey. To fail to consider, or to even recognize that even one line of dialogue or one character decision that seems so negligible can in fact be significant when taken in the context of the whole story. That failing to do that can in combination with doing that over and over and over again, completely unravel your story. Just something to keep in mind. But then again, maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? That does it for me this week. Thank you very much for hanging out. This was Cosmoronic number 13. I'm Fringy, and I'll catch you all next time.